recording now.
Okay, good morning and welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of RP City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask all those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout? Can members of the local review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphone when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of these reviews. The meeting has been convened in response to 4 requests for review of the decisions taken by the appointed officer under the Council's scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now ask Mr. Masson, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews and to take a quick roll call of all members present. Mr. Masson.
Thank you. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replaced that with the local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner in 2011 stated that views by local review bodies should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you. Greg, could you switch off your camera, please? Greg Herrera, could you switch off your camera?
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, turning to consideration of the first review in respect to the decision to refuse the application for the installation of replacement roof to an existing sunroom and formation of raised decking with external stairs and balustrade to rear of 27 Cairn Road, Bealside, Aberdeen, AB 159AL. Planning references 230595. We will now hear from Planning Advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I'll point out that Ms. Green's attendance throughout today's meeting provides us with the necessary planning guidance because she's not been involved in any of the applications in today's review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Over to you, Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. So this review is into the application, or the refusal of the application for the erection of the replacement roof to the sunroom and the raised decking to the rear. The review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit, and the applicant indicated on the notice that there were no new matters submitted with the review. However, it was noted that the submissions included a new matter, which was the representation from Councillors Bolton and Massey. So I'll cover that later in my presentation. in terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant expressed the view that there should be a site visit, and the review shouldn't proceed just on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll proceed to provide some background information on the case before handing back to members to decide how to proceed. So this is the location plan, and the application relates to the detached house on the south side of Cairn Road in Bealdside. And this is just an overhead shot from Google. North Deeside Road is down here at the bottom. These houses front onto it. And this is the application property here, fronting onto Cairn Road and backing onto this lane to the back of properties. And then a 3D image taken from Google. So this is the application property with the existing conservatory that is to be re-roofed. A block plan of the site as existing. That's the conservatory there. And then as proposed, showing the decking. And this is the ground floor plan. So that's ground floor on Cairn Road. Obviously it's above ground level to the rear. So this is the sunroom, and then decking and stairs down to the garden level. And the next slide just shows the lower ground level. There will be support posts installed to support the decking, and then the stairs going up to the ground floor level of the house. And first floor level shows the decking, the upper level of the house with the roof of the conservatory. And then side elevations. So this is to the west. See the end of the conservatory, and then the decking and steps down to the garden level. The other side elevation on the side of the steps. You can see this screening on the other side of the decking. That was on the far side to this. But we'll see that on the elevation from the rear. So you can see that the 1.6 metre screening has been added along the side of the decking. And these are cross sections both ways through the conservatory, and then the decking here, and then sort of lengthways through the conservatory. So can't see the decking in that one. And the next few images are some visuals produced by the applicant's agent. So that's looking sort of southwest. You can see the neighbour's garden in the background. There's a few of these, I'll go through them quite quickly. It's the neighbouring house in the background. Just there. And again. And then looking back from down the garden, you can see the relationship between the two houses. And looking from the neighbour's garden. It's on the west side of the property. So reasons for refusal, which are stated in full in the report of handling in the agenda, The key points were the negative impact on amenity in the surrounding area, and in particular overlooking and loss of privacy from the decking, especially to number 29 Cairn Road, which is the house to the west, and that the proposal would therefore be contrary to policies on design, residential and residential amenity in the local plan and NPF 4. So moving on to the applicant's case, it's stated that policies 14 and 16 in NPF 4 are more relevant to housing developments and not to this application. I should just add that there were two statements, one from the applicants themselves and one from the agents. So these points sort of amalgamate all of those. It's stated that the roof replacement doesn't detract from the area, that it highlights that the land falls to southwards towards the rear garden with a storey height difference, and that there are existing views across the neighbouring sites with low-level shrubs to the west to number 29, and there are existing open views of that garden. Whereas the boundary with number 25 is planted with a high hedge and trees, so there's no overlooking to the east side. Described how there's an existing patio at ground floor level, but it's not suitable due to the access at lower level. And the proposal would allow direct access to the decking from the dining area and kitchen at ground floor level. The decking follows the line of the patio underneath. It's described the case officer's suggestion for reducing the width and length of the decking. The difficulties with that in terms of design are described, that the balustrade would conflict with the open door of the conservatory. It's also mentioned that there's no objection from the neighbour and that there's existing visibility from both houses across both gardens. And then there are a number of photographs of the views from the house across the gardens. Just continuing with the applicant's case. They have incorporated the amendment to install the 1.6 metre high obscured glazed panels along the west side to number 29. They consider that altering the size of decking is unnecessary, as there would be no additional impact on overlooking, and that if they did reduce the size of the decking, there would be insufficient space for outside dining, with the space being nearly halved. They state that hedging could be planted and would in time form screening, and that they'd be willing to do that. In terms of policy H1 residential areas, they state that the proposal complies and that the only public view is from the rear lane. In terms of design policy, the decking would align with the side elevation of the house, whereas if it was reduced and pulled off that side, it would look unbalanced from the rear and ruin the aesthetics of the rear elevation of the house. Whereas whereas the proposal would result in improvement to the appearance of the street, and it would match facilities that in neighbouring houses. It's stated that policy 14 on design doesn't apply to private areas, just to public views, and that policy 16 in NPF 4 applies only to new developments. And also they highlight that the proposal does not affect parking, green space, light, noise or air quality, and it works with the existing landscape. So now move on to the new matter and just hand over to the legal representative to talk about that with this slide.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's just a quick bit on the new matters, just to remind members about what is to be considered here. As you'll be aware, a new matter is any information or evidence that wasn't before the planning officer when they made their original decision. The legislation is clear that any party can raise a new matter in an LRB only if the new matter could not have been raised before the decision was made, or that it's been raised before that time was a consequence of exceptional circumstances. So it's for any party who wants to raise a new matter in an LRB to explain why the new matter meets the above tests and provide any supporting documents or evidence to that effect. And the LRB needs to then decide whether to accept or reject the new matter. If the LRB accepts a new matter, it will consider it along with the other information and evidence in the review. But if the LRB rejects a new matter, it will not take that into account into consideration of the review. I'll now hand back to the LRB for members to have a discussion and to determine whether they are satisfied that they have been provided with the information to conclude that the above criteria has been met in order for the LRB to take the new matters into account in the determination of the review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now have to determine on the new matters that are before us what are members minded on this. I feel in terms of the contents of the letter could essentially have been raised ahead of time in terms of looking at specific policies in relation to the application. So what are other thoughts on this, Councillor Copeland or Councillor Bouse?
I would concur with yourself, convener. Yeah, I believe could have been raised ahead of time.
Councillor Copeland?
Yeah, sorry, my mic was off. I agree with yourself and Councillor Bouse. It could have been put in earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, at this moment, I think we'll be not accepting the additional information in at this point. So therefore, I'll hand back to you, Ms. Green.
Okay, thank you, convener. I'll just okay, yeah, at that point I was to hand back to you to decide how to proceed. So I didn't have anything further to add.
That's fine, Ms. Green. Thank you very much. So it's back to me. So we therefore now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, we can request further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At this moment, with the information that Ms. Green has provided, as well as the photographs that have been provided by the applicant, I am happy to go ahead with today's determination. I'll see how other members are minded. Councillor Bouse?
Yes, convener, I'm also happy to go ahead with the information we've got.
Thank you, Councillor Copeland.
Yes, go ahead.
That's fine. Okay, as members feel we have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for this review. Ms. Green.
Thank you, convener. So first of all, policies from National Planning Framework 4. So these form part of the development plan together with the adopted local plan. The first three policies on tackling the climate and nature crises, climate mitigation and biodiversity are relevant to almost all applications, and members should take into account the scale of the proposal in terms of those matters. Policy 14 on design and 16 on quality homes, I will just cover in the next slide. So the relevant part of policy 16 is section G, where it states that householder proposals would be supported where they do not have a detrimental impact on the character or environmental quality of the home and surrounding area in terms of their size, design and materials. The second part, they shouldn't have a detrimental impact on neighbouring properties in terms of overshadowing or overlooking. And then policy 14 contains a number of criteria, but overall proposals will be designed to improve the quality of an area regardless of scale or location. Returning to policies in the local plan, the site is zoned under the residential areas policy H1. policy D1 on design and quality placemaking is also relevant, and the householder guidance. So I'll cover those in more detail. Policy H1 states that proposals for householder development will be approved in principle, and then there are a number of criteria. Maybe the most relevant of those is the unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area. There isn't a loss of public open space, and then this one complies with supplementary guidance. The relevant guidance would be the householder guide. So I've got that on the next slide. So in terms of decking, proposals should not result in an adverse impact on the amenity of adjacent dwellings, including internal and external space. And then there's a presumption against forming decking to the front or on a prominent elevation. And design policy, this is similar really to policy 14 and NPF 4. The policy recognises that not all development will be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but recognises that good design and detail adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. So overall, the evaluation should be on the basis of policies within NPF 4 and the local development plan, and all applications should be determined in accordance with those policies unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with each application treated on merit. So for this particular application, would the proposals comply with the zoning policy H1? And in particular, how would they affect the character and amenity of the area and the neighbouring property in particular? Would there be an unacceptable impact on overlooking and privacy? And does the proposal comply with the development plan when considered as a whole, or are there material considerations weighing otherwise? Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, convener. Lucy, can I see the slide of the Google slide of the street with the existing there at the moment? It was a very fast slide, I think.
Right, just one moment. Right, at last.
Right. Can we get the other one close up so we can see the existing back of the property, please? That's it. That'll do nicely. So, all right, to continue, convener. The existing sort of sunroom, that's at first floor level at the back, is that right?
Yes, I mean, the plans call it ground level. You come in at that level at the front.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's the sunroom though. The decking would be at that
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. And this is hedging and stuff. I noticed could you go in the next picture?
Was it the block plan or the?
No, keep going. It's a picture of the back of the houses. I think it's a virtual reality, Joby, I think.
Right. I'll go through them quickly.
You keep going. Keep going. Yeah, that's it. Right. So that screening is at the same side as number 29, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we go on another picture? Yeah, that's fine. So effectively, the sunroom is overlooking a neighbour's garden as is. This would be an addition, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, fine, that's it. That's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Copeland. Any more questions from members? Not seeing anything further at this time. Okay. Therefore, in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I'm probably behind. No, I'm not. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination, members. So, few notes from me in terms of what we've read. Obviously, there's been no objections from the neighbour with regard to the additional decking and formation of the new roof. I question the change of the view. Obviously, we've got the pre-existing sunroom, which also overlooks number 29, with the additional decking on with the way the decking's coming out of the property, with the new screening going down between the houses. Does that sort of enhance the screening? Does that detract from the view from 29? Obviously, if we're bringing the point or the aspect of view into 29 further away from that person's property is the way I'm coming from this one. And that sort of opaqueness of that sort of glass wall adds to additional screening in that sense. What we think, that's sort of where I'm coming from at the moment. Any other opinions?
No, I'd be coming with you as well, Camille. I'm quite happy to grant this. I don't think it's having a detrimental effect on the neighbours at all. So I'd be happy to grant.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would also agree. I don't think it has any more detrimental impact than what already exists. It's got additional screening, so yeah, I would agree with you, convener, and with you, Councillor Cope.
Okay. So therefore, we'll start deciding on the policies, which will be MPF 4 in terms of policy 16G2, which regards to overlooking, and LDP H1 elevation of the decking versus public view. Again, this decking is to the rear of the property, and there's no obviously public viewpoints of that, so I'm quite content in terms of that policy there. So if we are happy that the local review body has therefore agreed to overturn the decision of the appointing officer, and we now need to consider whether any further conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. Do members have any further conditions?
There is mention of additional hedging.
Mhm.
Can we make that a condition that it's basically just to screen the, if you like, the base columns for the ramp, for the decking? Can we do that?
Yeah, Ms. Green, are we happy to include that softening landscaping to go in there?
Yes. I don't know whether you also wanted to consider a condition that the screening has to be erected, because although it's shown on the plans, that could be just the
Yes, I
condition
see
that
what you mean.
requires it
So
to be erected.
yeah, ensuring that screening against the decking is to that opaque nature. I'm more than happy to go down that route as well. That's Are members
Agreed.
happy with that?
Yep.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Therefore, please note that decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days with regard to this application. Thank you very much, members. Okay, so turning to consideration of the second review in respect to the decision to refuse the application for the installation of replacement 1.5 story rear extension with raised decking, fencing, steps and balustrade, and alterations to existing rear dormer, 10 Woodhill Place, Aberdeen, AB 155LF, planning reference 231176. We'll now pass back to Miss Green, who's a planning advisor in attendance. And just to note that the previous mention that Miss Green will not be asked to view any merits on the case, and that she'll be providing a neutral role in this application. Over to you, Miss Green.
Thank you, convener. Should be seeing my presentation now.
We are, thank you.
Thanks. So this review at 10 Woodhill Place has been submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit following the decision of the appointed officer. And the applicant has indicated that there are no new matters within the submissions. In terms of procedure, the applicant has indicated that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll provide some background information on the case before handing back to the convener for members to decide how to proceed. So this is the location plan. Application relates to a semi-detached house which has a driveway to the north side. And members may remember that there was a previous case to the LRB in August last year for a similar extension with different materials. So I'll run through slides. This is a 3D image just showing the front of the house on Google. And the rear of the house. And again, the ground falls away to the rear so that you can see there's sort of almost a story height below ground level. It's about 1.5 to 2 meters. And there's a boundary wall along the boundary with the attached neighbour, and that's about 1.6 meters in height. And there's also a single-story outbuilding at the end of the garden. And the existing rear extension is approximately 3.7 meters from the boundary with the house at number 8. And there's an elevated walkway surrounding the extension, and that's raised by about 1.5 meters above ground level, and it has metal railings. And there's approximately 2 meters behind that, between that walkway and the boundary with number 8. That's just a further image of the rear of the house. And then turning to the plans, this is as existing, showing the existing rear extension, and then the proposed extension would go across the rear of the house from the boundary with the neighbour. This is a more detailed plan showing the extension and then the decking beyond that. Sorry, this is the existing plan. So that's obviously the boundary extension and the raised walkway. And then at first floor level, within the extension, there's a bedroom. And that's the rear elevation. So this The previous application, this was timber cladding, and it's now render, white coloured render. And that's the side elevation closest to number 12. And to the attached neighbour. So this wall would be in Fife stone. And then this is timber screen to the cladding, to the decking, sorry. I think the neighbour mentions a basement doorway, which would come in here. And then cross sections of the upper level. So that's just top one, it's across the bedroom that way. And then this one across through the bathroom. And then there are some visuals as well. So the key points from the reason for refusal. Firstly, in terms of materials, it's stated that the change to a rendered finish doesn't reflect the character of the area. Secondly, that the proposal would result in an overbearing and incongruous addition within the area, which would be out of keeping with the scale and character. That there would be overlooking and loss of privacy with a raised deck and increased intensity of use at an elevated level, and an impact on residential amenity, and in particular on number 8. And that the proposal would therefore be contrary to policies on design, residential areas and amenity in the local plan and national planning framework 4. The applicant's case. The applicant describes the previous application, which was at LRB back in August last year, and that the LRB was minded at that time to approve except for the change of materials from timber to cladding. From timber to render, sorry, that should say. It was timber cladding before. However, the current application at LRB has been refused on the same grounds as the previous application. So the applicant does not consider the proposal to be overdevelopment of the plot or out of keeping with the scale, material or character of the area. The proposed extension is in part a replacement of an existing extension to the rear of the property, and the footprint of the dwelling would be increased by only 17 square metres, with the resultant plot ratio being 25% developed. Proposals are at the rear of the property and not visible from the street frontage. The proposed extension ties in with the existing roof profile, eaves and ridges, levels, and the pitch and hipped gable end. Some further points from the applicant. The proposed extension matches the existing dwelling in terms of roof finish. They would be open to discussion on external materials. Majority of the dwellings in the vicinity are 1.5 storey, and a number of these have 1.5 story full property with extensions to the rear. They highlight that the site is sloping and all properties are elevated above the gardens with overlooking of neighbours' gardens. The existing rear extension includes a conservatory with south-facing glazing, which overlooks number 8, the attached neighbour. And the proposal removes this direct line of sight with windows all to face the private garden. So number 10, the application property, and number 12, along with others in the street, share driveway access, and as a result, they have reduced privacy between the dwellings. Also, proposals were amended to incorporate a privacy screen to the boundary of the proposed decking, which would limit overlooking to number 8. And it's further stated that the Juliet balcony, by which they mean the full height glazed window at first floor level, has an external protective barrier. So I think the point there is that it's a full height window rather than a balcony. Planning consent was recently approved for a raised rear deck to the neighbouring property at number 12. There's a photo submitted showing the view from the existing conservatory, showing the degree of overlooking that exists at present. But the current proposal omits cladding and has specified render in keeping with the existing extension and others in the area, as well as the LRB discussions. And also that the render doesn't affect the scale of the proposal, as the decision states. So in terms of consultations, the Rosemount and Mile End Community Council, there were no comments received from them. There was a representation from the attached neighbour at number 8, and there was a further submission to the LRB. And the points made were that the materials they consider an improvement. They highlight the loss of light to the entrance path to their basement and the ground floor room above the basement door. So there's a window above the basement door and also to the side of the conservatory. They raise the visual impact of the high wall on the boundary, including the further impact of the fence to the decking. That's the screening fence to the side of the decking. They state that the decking is an addition and would provide a view to their garden. They point out that the extension at number 12 is smaller in width, not across the full rear of the house, and that the decking is also less in size. And they highlight that the proposal would likely involve the removal of their relatively new fencing and disruption. So the neighbour states that they would prefer the extension not to be full width and to retain light to their house and have less decking to reduce overlooking. So at that point, I'll hand back to you, convener, to decide how to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At this moment, I feel I have sufficient information to proceed, but we'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Copeland.
Agreed.
Councillor Mouse.
Agreed.
Thank you. So as members have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for the review.
Thank you. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so relevant policies from National Planning Framework, which forms part of the development plan together with the adopted Local Development Plan 2023. As before, the policies 1, 2 and 3 are overarching and relevant to almost every application, for members to consider the scale of the proposal in terms of the relevance of those. And then policies on design and quality homes, which I'll cover in the next slide. The policy 16, as with the previous application, householder development proposals will be supported where they do not have a detrimental impact on character in terms of size, design and materials, and also the effect on the neighbouring properties in terms of physical impact, overshadowing and overlooking. And then design policy. Design proposals should improve the quality of the area, whether in urban or rural locations and regardless of scale. And then moving on to the LDP policies. the house is zoned within a residential area under policy H1, and there's design policy D1 and policy on amenity D2, and that covers things like privacy, light and overlooking, etc. So policy 1, H1, householder development. The criteria for consideration are whether the proposal involves overdevelopment, whether there's an unacceptable impact on character and amenity of the surrounding area. In this case, there's no loss of public open space, and also of relevance is the supplementary guidance. So I'll just move on to the householder guide. And the general principles are relevant in this case. Extensions should be architecturally compatible with the original house. Materials should be complementary. Extensions shouldn't overwhelm or dominate the original house. And there shouldn't be a situation where amenity is adversely affected in terms of privacy, daylight, and general amenity, counting against the proposal. I noted from the case officer's report that the 45-degree method showed some impact on the ground floor window above the basement door, and that there would be some impact on sunlight reaching the neighbour's garden. However, large areas remained unaffected in terms of the householder guide. Design policy, again, recognises that development may not be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but recognises good design and detail adds to the overall attractiveness of the environment. And then a reminder that decisions should be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And so the basis for the decision in this case, does the proposal comply with zoning policy H1 in terms of character and amenity of the area and impact on light, overlooking and privacy? And overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan when considered as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, members? Can we possibly have a look at the proposed elevation of the property with the new rendering, please?
Yeah, just 1 second. Do you want to look at the drawing rather than the visual images?
Yeah, if you could take us through the drawings initially and then move on to the visual imaging just to get a good perspective again.
Yeah. Yes, that was the rear elevation. Side elevations, so the 5 stone there to the neighbour.
That's perfect, thank you. Do members have any further questions?
No.
No, okay. So in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into review. So we now go on to determination. How are members minded on this one?
I'd be minded to grant, personally. I think it's judging for that last photograph, it was so it doesn't keep him with the house next door, but the shared driveway coming down the middle.
Mm.
And I just feel it doesn't have significant detriment on the other neighbour to warrant refusal, so I'd be inclined to grant.
Yeah, I think from the previous time this came to LRB, I think members were sort of minded on similar grounds at that time. I think it was just the overall finishing of the building that was the issue. It was quite timber clad or timber heavy at the time, and I think we were looking to invite them back with how that could be changed, and I think that's what they've come back with today. There is a mention of sort of overlooking of the neighbour's garden and things like that, but going from the photos that we've just seen again regarding the end elevation of the property, there is that additional screening in place in terms of looking into the neighbour's conservatory and things like that. So it does provide that extra privacy for both the applicant and the neighbour. Yeah, Desmond.
I don't think I have much more to add. I totally agree with both of you on this. And with the changes that they've made to the materials, I think favour of proving it.
Okay. So therefore, we will go ahead, and as the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer, we now need to consider whether we have any further conditions that should be attached to the approval of the application. Do you feel that you have any further conditions? I don't know if Ms. Green would have anything to add into that at that point.
I think, like the previous one, I'd just add, could consider whether the screening fence should be erected.
Yeah. Yep, happy to add that in to ensure that there's additional privacy for both the applicant and the neighbour there. That's more than acceptable. Anyone else other-minded?
Just a question on that one, convener. I think it's currently being suggested it should be timber screening.
Mm-hmm.
Is that acceptable, or should we be looking for maybe opaque glass or something that's less bulky, or if you like? I mean, I'm quite happy to have timber if necessary, but maybe we should look at the possibility of something else, as long as it provides a screen.
Yeah, I guess like opaque glass and things like that may provide additional light to transfer through there instead of blocking out by timber. So I guess that would be, I'd be happy with that. Yeah.
Is that possible, Ms. Green?
Yes, we could request further details that show a screen that would allow light to pass through it. Yeah, a glazed,
Okay.
screen.
Yeah. Okay, we'll add on that condition as well. That's perfect. Okay, so yep, the application has been overturned, and the review notice will be sent out to the applicant within the next couple of days. Thank you very much, members. Okay, so turning to consideration of the third review in respect to the decision to refuse the application of the formation of driveway and alterations to boundary wall at 27 Cromwell Road, Aberdeen, AB 154UQ, planning reference 230946. We will again hear from planning and advisor and attendance Ms. Green, who will provide us with the relevant considerations of the review. Again, she will only be providing the factual and neutral role, as it's only here to provide guidance only. Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay, this review is into the refusal of the application for formation of driveway and alterations to boundary wall at 27 Cromwell Road. It was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated that there are no new matters within the review submissions. And in terms of procedure, the applicant has expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll proceed to provide some background before handing back to members to decide how to proceed. So the site's shown here on the location plan. It's an end terrace house opposite the playing fields on Cromwell Road. And this just shows a slightly wider area. It's the application property, Anderson Drive there, going to Union Grove. And that's the overhead from Google again. Slightly closer in because I thought it might be helpful just to see the rear garden there onto Cromwell Gardens at the rear. And you can see the relationship of some of the other houses. So these have access onto the rear lane. That's the house there that's referred to within the submissions with parking here. And then these houses don't have access onto the rear lane. So this is the front application property here. And these houses from here don't have access onto the rear lane. These ones do. And then that's looking down towards Anderson Drive with the application house there. It's slightly warped by the angle of street view there. And then this photograph is from the applicant's submissions. It looks a bit blurred there. Just looking from the street. And this is the plan of the driveway. So the driveway would be 3 meters wide by 5 meters long, and it would involve taking down this section of wall here, which the applicant states is less than 3.5 meters in length of wall taken down. And the elevation of the wall there, and as existing. So the reasons for refusal in the report, the key points are the loss of the granite wall, which is a historic boundary feature which unifies the street, that as rear parking is used for houses on this stretch of the road, and that it would be the driveway and removal of the wall would be a negative feature in terms of the character of the area. So for the applicant, I would just say that I've incorporated here the points made by the applicant with the submission of the review, and then those made in response to further submissions from the neighbour. So all the points are amalgamated into this summary of the applicant's case. So first of all, the proposal maintains granite heritage of the neighbourhood in terms of the minimal length of wall that would be removed, with wall remaining, and that part of the garden would also remain. The applicant describes how the driveway is needed at the front for the charging of an electric car, and describes the difficulties of installing that to the rear. Quite a number of car parking spaces to the front of properties in the area are described, and those include those to the east at 21, 23 and 25, and then others along the remainder of the stretch of the road. They highlight that there are no objections from the road's DM team. State that the representations made are unrelated to the proposal. In terms of using the rear access, they describe how that would necessitate widening the gates and other difficulties, and also that there are raspberry bushes, apple trees and sheds within the rear garden on either side of the gates, and that those would be either required to be removed or disrupted if access had to be taken from the rear. They describe how the proposal helps towards the climate crisis and mitigation by providing charging for an electric car and also retaining plants and trees to the rear. And they also describe how the property to the rear has 3 cars and that makes the access congested. And there are also other photographs and descriptions of cars parked within Cromwell Gardens to the rear. The applicant states that their car's been damaged in the rear lane and that a van often blocks access out of the rear driveway or out of the rear gates. They detail the number of vehicles associated with the neighbour at number 29 and the difficulties for the appellant to park. There are 3 objections to the original planning application, and there's further submission to the LRB and then response by the applicant, as I mentioned. So all the points made are covered in this slide. First of all, I make the point that if the application was approved, it would set a precedent which would be to the detriment of the character of this prominent street. The proposal would result in 2 spaces for the applicant, 1 to the front and 1 to the rear. They state that there would be the loss of 2 on-street spaces, which would impact amenity and the community, including users of the playing field opposite. And they state that the installation of the driveway would reduce on-street parking by 50% between number 25 and Burns Road. There are various diagrams submitted which show different situations in terms of where driveways exist to the front of houses, for example, on the north side of Cromwell Road, and where properties don't have access to the rear, and then for other properties where there is access to the rear. So there's a number of diagrams provided in the submissions from the objector. They highlight road safety and visibility concerns due to the location of the proposal in relation to an existing traffic island. They state that the proposed space appears to be slightly off-centre, but should be moved further away from the existing traffic island. They highlight that the length of the driveway and the gravel may not comply with guidelines. They state that the design and inclusion of a driveway is not in keeping with houses and flats from number 25 moving westward along Cromwell Road, and that the impact of the proposal on green spaces, biodiversity, aesthetics and well-being, storm management and the value of properties. And also that the submitted photographs of cars parked in the street are not representative. So in terms of consultations, there was no objection from the roads team. In terms of the loss of on-street parking, they note that 1 space would be gained for the applicant in terms of the driveway and 1 would be lost on street, and they feel that the impact is negligible. The Community Council had no comments, and so I will pass back to you, convener, for your members to consider how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, a reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, we can request further written information to be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. At this moment, I'm content to proceed. We'll just quickly go around the room. Councillor Copeland.
Agreed.
Councillor Bowes.
Agrees.
Thank you very much. As we have sufficient information, we'll pass back to Ms Green, who will take us through the relevant policies of the application.
Thank you, convener. So, as mentioned previously, the development plan includes the National Planning Framework and the Local Development Plan, and the policies that are relevant are the same ones as in the previous cases. Policies 1, 2 and 3 are overarching and apply to almost every application consideration should be given to the scale of the proposal in terms of its impact on climate change. I'll just move on to policy 16. Sorry about that, I'm just going to... Right, policy 16 on quality homes. So householder developments will be supported where they do not have a detrimental impact on character and environmental quality of the home and surrounding area in terms of size, design and materials, and also where they don't have a detrimental impact in terms of overshadowing and overlooking. And design proposals should be designed to improve the quality of the area regardless of location or scale, and where proposals are detrimental to amenity, they won't be supported. Local development plan policies. The site's located within a residential area under policy H1, and design policy as well as the policy on granite heritage are also relevant, as well as transport and accessibility guidance. So just in terms of the guidance, at the time the application was determined, that was referenced as interim guidance, but it's now approved and is the Aberdeen planning guidance, and obviously is a material consideration. I'll cover that in a moment. So first of all, policy H1. So household development will be improved in principle in terms of these criteria. So whether it constitutes overdevelopment, consideration of the impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area, whether there's a loss of open space, and by that in this policy means public open space, and also supplementary guidance, and the transport guidance is relevant in this instance. I'll just firstly cover the policy on granite heritage. So this states that the council will seek to retain granite features, including boundary walls. In terms of the transport Aberdeen planning guidance, this states that where the creation of a driveway with one space would lead to the loss of an on-street parking space, permission would not generally be granted due to the loss of amenity for all residents on the street. It describes the size of driveways for existing houses, and it states that for local distributor roads, which this is, there would be no need or no requirement to exit and enter in forward gear. In terms of design, again, developments of all scales should exhibit good design and detailing that add to the attractiveness of the built environment. And in terms of evaluation, application should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with each application on merit. So the basis for this particular decision, policy within the residential areas policy, does the proposal affect the character of the area, including the loss of a section of granite wall, and is that in accordance with policy D7 on granite heritage? In terms of the transport guide, it's the loss of one on-street space versus the gain of a private space, and how significant is that? So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Quick question from me with regards to the finish of the driveway. There's a mention of gravel. I'm just wondering what is the proposed finish of this and if there is any issues with gravel being used.
There's both sets and gravel. The sets are within the first few meters of the road, so there wasn't an issue with that raised. I think the gravel is further back into the property.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Copeland.
Thank you, Convener. Could we possibly see the street slide again? There was mention of a traffic island in one of the things. I'd just like to see the street to see just how close the traffic island is.
Yep. Right, let me share it again. Well, that I can show you a few images.
Yeah.
That's the driveway would be here.
Yes, can I just confirm the applicant house is this one with the two white doors, just on the left hand side. The traffic island's about 20 metres away.
Yeah. That's the. Let me see if
That's fine.
it's probably shown on. Okay.
Yep.
Can I ask? Is this a two flat? Is this two separate flats or is it one flat? One house? Do we know?
It's one house.
One house. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Does the applicant or has the applicant agent come forward with any use of the removal of the granite at all? Or is it just to be removed off site, disposed of?
I haven't seen any reference to reuse of the granite within the submissions. No.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. So any further questions? Okay, there's no more further questions. So in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination. Looking at the streetscape, I do note that there is a number of other formed driveways right along Cromwell Road. So I think we take this application and the merits of its own application other than Councillor Copeland.
I'm quite happy to grant this. I do have some concerns regarding the granite with policy D7, but as you said yourself, there are other driveways who have undoubtedly had granite walls at some point and they've been removed. And I think we've got to be thinking environmentally here as well. The creation of a charging point for electric cars, and it does take a car off the street. So I'd be quite happy to grant this one. Perhaps we can maybe Ms. Green can tell us, can we set a condition as to what has to happen to the granite? Or is that with our powers?
Do you have something in mind? I suppose we could have a condition that asked for details, but that's quite open really. It would be best to specify if there was something.
I was going to say that I know that we have a store for granite. It's at some quarry or other where the council has its stores of granite. I just wonder if we can have a condition that it's got to be put to storage or made available for recycling if possible. Yeah, possible for recycling. I mean, it may not be feasible, I don't know.
Could have Yes, it could have a condition that requested that it be either stored or an alternative proposal for use on site, maybe.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was thinking in terms of the gravel aspect of that driveway. If the granite could then be chipped and then reused instead of gravel, and it's it's granite chippings around the driveway instead of, if that's something that could maybe put in place. I'm not too sure how easy that is a condition though.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how reasonable it would be to require that the blocks are chipped.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's not
make
easy.
to-
I was going to say, maybe we could make it that the granite is disposed of in a environmentally friendly manner.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Left it for there.
We'll keep it nice and easy and go with that. Yeah. In terms of that, with that additional condition, I'm minded to grant as well, Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's no net loss to parking because you are losing an on-street market, but someone's coming off the roads.
Yeah.
It is obviously regrettable, the loss of granite, but I think if we can get a condition in to ensure that's disposed of in a sustainable manner, then that would allay my somewhat my concern. So
Yeah.
I agree with you in this, convener.
Okay, so perfect. So therefore, the local review body has therefore agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer. We now need to consider which of the conditions should be approved. So we'll put on the condition of sustainability of the granite in terms of recyclability, etc., etc. So we are happy with going with that.
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Therefore, the application has been approved. Okay, so turn to the consideration of the fourth and final review in respect to the decision to refuse the application for demolition of existing guest house and erection of dwelling house at 1B Scheme Place. That's in Dice, Aberdeen, AB 217AY, planning reference 230596. We'll now again hear from planning advisor and attendant Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the planning proposal and reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. Again, Ms. Green attends today because she's not been involved in the previous planning of this, and will be providing a neutral aspect to taking us through this planning review. So hand over to Ms. Green.
Right, I'll just share my presentation. Okay, so this review is into the request for review following refusal of the application at 1B Scheme Place, Dice, for the demolition of an existing guest house and erection of a dwelling. And the review was submitted with all necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The appellant has indicated on the notice of review that there are no new matters submitted. In terms of procedure by which the review should be concluded, the applicant has expressed the view that a site visit should take place in order to fully understand the site situation, and the review shouldn't proceed on the basis of the information submitted. But I will first provide some background information before handing back for members to decide how to proceed. Okay, this is the location plan showing the site here, with this park area to the rear and a house adjacent. And I'll just show you the overhead from Google. And then a 3D image just showing the front of the existing building. So this would be the site. And then some photographs of the existing building on site. That's obviously the adjacent house. And two more. So this is the block plan showing the proposed house. And it would be of similar footprint to the house, neighbouring house at 1A. And then existing elevation and then as proposed. So it would match the ridge height of the adjacent house. And those are the rear elevations. Again, this is the proposed house. And the side elevations. So it's just a photograph there of the side of the existing building from the car park. And that's the existing elevation. The ground floor plan. And the first floor. So the reason for refusal from the decision notice, in terms of policy H1 residential areas, the proposal would result in overdevelopment of the site and has an impact on the character of the area owing to the disruption to the pattern of development. Furthermore, there would be an impact on the amenity of number 1A, the adjacent house, Scheme Place, due to the reduction in private garden ground, and also an impact on the amenity of future occupiers of the proposed dwelling owing to an insufficient sized private garden area and unacceptable external noise levels. And the proposal therefore doesn't comply with policy H1. And it also with policy B3 in terms of noise from the airport, and also design policy and policy on amenity in the local development plan. Also contrary to policy 14 on design within NPF 4. So the applicant's case contains a number of photographs of the surrounding area, including flats on Farburn Place, and also the existing house at, that should be 1A, would lose 21 metres square of garden, but would retain another 183 metres squared of outside space, equating to more than 2/3 of garden that would be retained for that existing house. And they highlight that the house is consistent with the neighbour and they would be open to discuss the materials. They state that the house would not be out of character with the surrounding area and they refer to the design of the flats on Fairburn Place, which they state are simple and low budget. And there's a noise survey submitted, and that states that with mitigation measures, residents would live in a suitable environment. There were comments from the Community Council, Dyson Stoningwood, and they note that the proposal has been slightly modified compared to an earlier proposal which was withdrawn. The design is improved, but they state that the footprint of the house is still significantly greater than 33% of the plot. And that it wouldn't comply with the subdivision and redevelopment of residential curtilages guidance. They state that it should be carefully scrutinised to ensure compliance with policies for residential areas and on design. So just to note in terms of footprint that the plot coverage is just over 40%, as referred to there. There was no objection from Aberdeen Airport. There was no objection from roads. And in terms of consultation with environmental health, they accept the report's findings in terms of internal noise and the measures that would be required to achieve a suitable internal level of noise. In terms of external amenity, they note that the proposal conflicts with policy B3 in terms of external noise from the airport. There were no objections from the waste team, and there were no representations. So at that point, I'll hand back to you, convener, to decide, for members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information for us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request further written information to be provided here and to be arranged for a site visit to be undertaken. At the moment, I feel we have sufficient information to proceed, but I'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Copeland.
Agreed.
Councillor Mouse.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we'll now hand back to Ms Green to take us through the relevant policies. Ms Green.
Thank you. So in terms of policies in National Planning Framework 4, which forms part of the development plan together with the local development plan, the policies 1, 2 and 3 on the climate crisis mitigation and biodiversity, as I previously mentioned, consider in terms of the scale of development. Policy 13 on sustainable transport encourages developments in locations which are accessible by active travel or public transport. And policy 14 on design, which was used as one of the reasons for refusal and relates to design in it's a similar policy to policy D1, which I'll cover in a moment. So policies from the local development plan, the relevant ones are highlighted there. Site lies within a residential area. And policy D2 on amenity, that covers things like privacy, daylighting, and the quality and quantity of external space. As we mentioned, the policy on noise, and in particular policy B3 on noise from the airport. R5 requires there to be adequate storage space for waste management. Policy R6 requires there to be reductions in carbon emissions from new buildings. And sustainable transport, that the development should be accessible by public transport or active travel. And again, the parking requirements are in policy T3. And then there are various planning guidance notes that are relevant to determination listed there. But I'll now pick out the key points of the policies. And as I mentioned, the area is zoned under policy H1, where new development for residential shall only be approved where it doesn't constitute overdevelopment, does not have an unacceptable impact on character of and amenity of the surrounding area, there's no loss of open space, and where it complies with the relevant supplementary guidance. So in terms of redevelopment of residential curtilage policy, as a general guide, no more than 1/3 of a plot should be developed. And as I mentioned earlier, the plot coverage would be just over 40%. It considers the density of surrounding plots, so consider within context. And also it states that the character, scale and massing of a new dwelling should complement those in the surrounding area. So I'll just move on to policy B3, which relates to noise from Aberdeen Airport. So it states that applications for residential development in areas where aircraft noise levels are 57 decibels, as identified in the noise contour map, will be refused due to the inability to create an appropriate level of residential amenity and the need to safeguard future operation of Aberdeen International Airport. And also to note there that the noise impact assessment recommends mitigations, and that would include that windows would be closed with trickle ventilation in order to achieve appropriate indoor noise levels. So I'll just move on to the policy on design. Policy 14 in NPF 4, it has 6 qualities for successful places. The first one is that they should be healthy, providing a healthy physical and mental environment, pleasant in terms of natural and built spaces, well connected with transport networks to reduce car dependency, distinctive in terms of design, sustainable in terms of the use of resources, and adaptable so that they may be the building can be used for different uses over time and also accommodate the changing needs of different users. And policy D1 in the local plan contains similar recommendations in terms of qualities for successful places, and they both relate to small scale proposals. So in terms of evaluation, the primacy of the development plan, both national and local policy, and all applications should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with each application being treated on merits. So for this particular decision, would the proposal comply with policy H1 residential areas? How would it affect the character and amenity of the area, and would there be a satisfactory residential environment for future residents, including in terms of noise? And overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan when considered as a whole? Or are there material considerations weighing for or against the proposal? So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, members?
Yeah, I've got a question, Convener, thank you. The current building that's there just now, we've heard that the proposed building is in the same footprint. So is the current building taking up 40% of the plot as well?
Well, the current building is a guest house rather than a house, and I think it covers nearly the whole plot.
So basically, what's proposed will cover less of the plot. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'll think of something else, but for the moment, that'll do.
In terms of the so B3 returns to airport to effects of noise and mitigations, has the applicant put forward anything to try and mitigate noise internally within the property at all, like, or is it just standard to what every other building in the area sort of has?
The windows, well, the recommended measures, which I suppose if it was to be approved, you could condition that they would be applied. That would include windows, which would have, in order to achieve the noise level, the windows would need to stay shut and they would have trickle ventilation. So that's put forward as part of the proposal, that those would be incorporated.
Okay.
So on that basis, environmental health were content with the interior noise. It was the exterior noise levels that they were concerned about.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing anything at this time. Okay. So, in accordance with the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination. So, I get that 40% of the curtilage will be taken up by the property, but that is a reduction of nearly 60% of what is currently there, going by what Ms. Green has said. So I'm content that we're actually increasing open space in terms of that to provide space for whoever uses the building to have. And I know there's a significant green space at the back of there in terms of car parking, in terms of play park anyway. So, you know, there's that expanded nature of that green space there. Yeah, I'm going down the lines of minded to approve unless anyone has anything additional or wants to add anything else in.
I agree with you, convener. Plenty of car parking right next door. There's easy access to public transport, both rail and bus. I say there's car parking right next door. There is a park at the back of the property, and what's being proposed is basically the same as what's next door to it. And I think with the appropriate conditions regarding build and noise abatement, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't. So I'd be with you. I'd be with you in granting.
Okay, Councillor Bears.
I'm also in agreement. Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, in terms of relevant planning policies, there we're in agreement that we're happy with how this is versus H1, and that we're not too concerned with policy B3 in terms of Aberdeen Airport and the radar. We're happy and content that in terms of policy D1, it is quality placemaking with the enhancement of open space, taking the building down from 100% to 40% of the curtilage. Okay, therefore, the local review body has therefore agreed to unanimously overturn the decision of the appointed officer. Therefore, we need to consider whether any additional conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. Ms. Green, do you have any conditions that may want to warrant onto this application?
Yes, I would recommend that you consider requiring the mitigations within the noise impact assessment to be implemented. That's the windows to provide a satisfactory level of noise internally. You might also want to consider materials, the boundary treatments, the arrangements for waste disposal, and also whether the low and zero carbon emissions policy, which requires a certain level of carbon emissions reductions through energy generating infrastructure, a condition that we've put on most residential applications.
Yeah, are members minded to go with that conditions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in agreement with that. Perfect. Therefore, that brings us to the end of today's LRB. Thank you much for all members' attendance, and to note that all decision notices from today's meetings will be issued to all applicants and agents within the next forthcoming days. Many thanks, members.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Bye now.
Bye.